Giselle Yasmin, the VP of Research at SSHRC.
Thank you very much. Et j'aimerais remercier le Conseil national de recherche pour cette séance. C'est vraiment une très belle collaboration. And I think this is Canary. This is thanks to Canary that we have such a good connection in Sydney. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's really nice, bright, and easy to follow virtual interaction. So we have an exciting panel. I don't want to take too long. We'll only have a few minutes for each of them to stimulate a discussion. Hopefully we'll have time for questions and comments after. And I think we have an issue. We've heard about tool makers and tool users, and we have often the two combined into one individual. So I know a number of people have spoken from both perspectives. And if the medium is the message, as Marshall McLuhan said, I think one of the key messages is being able to answer questions that could not be answered before, but also ask questions that could not or were not possible to ask before. So I'll ask each of the presenters to limit themselves to 5 minutes, a little soundbite, less is more. And we'll start with, I'll introduce them just before each of them speaks, to really focus on what did you find and what's the most important thing Canada needs to keep in mind during future development of the digital economy. We'll start with Richard Hornsby, who's director of the Music Center at the University of New Brunswick, who will speak about cultural industries.
Thanks. This will be very brief. I'm in part of my life, I've been chair of the Cultural Human Resources Council. Some of you are probably familiar with the sector councils across Canada, which are publicly funded but act independently and basically represent the workforce in different areas right across the country. And currently, I think over 50% of the workforce now is represented through sector councils. The Cultural Sector Council was one of the first to be in operation from the mid-90s on now. But to our points today, recently, the whole idea of digital technology has really come to the forefront of the radar of the cultural industries. And two studies which I'll refer to today, we have just recently done, and I chaired, but they were done by other people. This one, the Cultural HR Study, came out just before last Christmas, done by the Conference Board of Canada. It was the first and most comprehensive documentation right across the country of the state of human resources in the cultural sector. And I can only tell you because it's not quite out yet, this is the draft of the latest one, because what came out of the first study was digital technology is one of the major issues that the whole cultural sector is dealing with. And so they said, you need a study on digital technology. Here it is. So it's going to come out in the next couple of weeks officially and publicly, so I'm going to be reporting on what are the major things that are coming out of both of these two studies today. Just so you know, the cultural sector, as is defined by this group, and generally speaking through government agencies as well, is pretty massive. It includes, and I'll give you sort of the subsectors as we call them, music and sound recording, broadcasting, which is a growing area, film and television, separate from broadcasting, new media, which has already been talked about today, heritage, visual arts and craft, live performing arts, and writing and publishing. Together, depending on whose stats you use, it's over 500,000 to almost 1 million people in the workforce today. And in terms of GDP, combined more than forestry, mining, and agriculture together. So it's big, and it's growing. We have issues, though, and that's what some of these reports have been telling us. The digital effect is affecting all of these subsectors. Some have happened very quickly, and as has been talked about already today, obviously what we call the new media sector, just by the nature of what it is, has been at the forefront, but closely followed by music and sound recording, which happens to be my area. For 15 or 20 years now, we've been dealing with the effects of the digital economy as we talk about it now. Some things have worked out great, some things not so great, and we're sort of still in the middle of trying to figure out, if it will ever get figured out, what this is going to mean for the industry. What it has definitely done is be disruptive, and continues to be disruptive in different ways throughout each of those subsectors. One of my colleagues who's head of Simon & Schuster Canada, the writing and publishing side of me, called me up last year, almost a year ago now, and said, I'm negotiating a deal with iTunes. I need to talk to somebody in music that's actually done this so that we do it right. So we could use our failed expertise in a way in the music side of things and try and engage the other subsectors and share information about how we can benefit and make sure that we actually grow and have a Canadian industry that will function in the future. So this idea of sharing across the subsectors, sharing ideas, sharing how we have done things better or not so good in this new world is going to be one of the key things moving ahead. We have found that we're going to need to engage with to be successful moving forward. Another one of the things that we've looked at is how digital technology is affecting what we call the creative chain, and many of you may be familiar with that. There's various different ways of categorizing the bits and pieces of that. The way we've done it is start with what we call ideation and creation. So developing the creative ideas in a way. The development of those ideas would be 2, production would be 3, distribution 4, marketing 5, and consumption 6. And then at the very end, not to be forgotten, is preservation, and some people have already alluded to the issues in that area today. Depending on the subsector you're talking about, they're being touched upon in different ways, and some more strongly than others. Visual arts and crafts, for instance, is probably, if you use the grid Chad had on the board earlier on, they were actually in the far corner. But in our studies, it was actually, they were probably some of the last now to get affected by the general population and acceptance and wanting to perceive, to have product online or available to them whenever they want to have it available. As I said, music has sort of crossed that line now. We are beyond the point, over 50% now, both in money and product, digital download versus buying a CD or some kind of hard copy. The problem, though, of course, which is created from an industrial point of view and a commercial point of view, is that the money in the system, though, is about 1/10 of what it was before. What you paid $20, $25 for in terms of a CD, you're now paying 99 cents to maybe $3. So the money in the system is not there to keep what used to be the old industry going. We need to completely rethink what our industrial models have been. I'm going to focus on 3 things which were pertaining to the questions, 3 particular points that the cultural sector as a whole needs to do. The cultural sector needs to adopt new and emerging practice in content creation right up the value chain to benefit from the digital economy. If we don't do that, it's at our peril and our industries will suffer. Number 2, training needs to be coordinated between colleges, universities, and industry. It can be a touchy point for those of us that are in academia, but I believe it's going to be something that's going to be necessary as time moves on. If we don't coordinate efforts, we're going to have, as one of the just previous speakers talked about, we're going to have engineers driving taxis, and we're going to have musicians driving taxis too. We don't want either of those to happen. We can bring those things together in this new world to mutual benefit. And the third point is how to do some of this. Mentorship, internship, and short-term training versus traditional college university training was something that came out loud and clear in our study. It doesn't take away from the other, but it means that in this digital age, things are moving so quickly that if we consider after 4 years, 6 years, whatever your formal training is, to be the end result, it ain't going to work. We have to have both early career training, mid-career training, and even training for people further down their career, almost maybe waiting to make that transition out. And just to finish my little part here, there was a lovely caption that I heard over 2 years ago. I went to one of the EU conferences, and the people from Digital Britain came, and one of the presenters had a wonderful presentation and produced this word, this phrase, which has stayed with me. It's bringing together the pipe and the poetry, the infrastructure and the content, both of which, again, we've spoken about today. We need to make sure we're supporting both in both our training and our public support of what's going on. If we do one and not the other, we're going to suffer. If we do both, we'll benefit all around. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Irina Kondratova, and she is group leader at the NRC Institute for Information Technology in the People-Centered Technologies group. And she'll speak about ICT and healthcare, exploring the role of usability.
Glad to be here. In my short talk, I would like to share my experience in working with a wide range of projects that were developing or introducing technology, digital technology in healthcare. And this experience is mostly related to my work at NRC. I started in 2001. I am an engineer by training. However, within my group, I work with colleagues from social sciences and humanities. We all work in the area of technology, usability, and user interface design. So working for 10 years with different projects related to digital technologies in healthcare, what I discovered is that very often in this kind of projects, there is a lot of attention that is paid to safety of patient data, security. There is a lot of attention is paid to technical aspects such as systems talking to each other, interoperability. However, when evaluating these projects or even planning projects, there is not enough emphasis on technology usability. And right now, when we are looking at reducing the cost of healthcare, usability of technology becomes very important. And this is where engineers and social scientists and humanities people can work together to improve usability of technologies, but also to reduce costs. There is some research done for other industries that is showing that if usability factored in design right from the beginning of technology development, improvements in efficiencies could be more than 700%. Another research, again, not done in healthcare, because in health there is not enough emphasis on usability. There is the cost-benefit ratio for usability, which is 1 to 10 to 100. What does it mean? This means that if you will not incorporate usability of technology, if you will not conduct user-centered design at the beginning, then if you want to correct issues during the development process, it will cost you 10 times more. And if you want to correct issues when you already implemented technologies, it will cost you 100 times more. So think about all the savings we can achieve in healthcare by designing technology properly. What should we focus on? Well, first of all, it is important to make funding for human factors and usability research in healthcare continuous and, definitely well-supported field. Because if you think about other life-critical domains, such as airspace, such as aviation, such as military, human factors research are funded there continuously because they understand this is very important. If plane goes down because of poor interface design, that costs money. However, if we invest in healthcare technology and it's not adopted, well, we have the same consequences, or it could be patient safety that is on the line. It is also important to focus on designing inclusive user interfaces because users in healthcare could be people with disabilities, people that have, well, they might be speaking different languages, they have different cultural preferences. People are sick, tired, under stress, panicked. They might have low digital literacy, and this includes patients as well as medical professionals. So it's a very, very broad range of users, and inclusive user interface design should be the focus of this. And also another point I wanted to make, and this is quite a challenge, to design user interfaces people can walk up and start using with zero training. This is very difficult. However, if you think about medical professionals, a doctor that would be using electronic medical record in different hospitals, it could be one doctor working for different hospitals. So you cannot retrain yourself every time when you're moving from one place to another. So it should be intuitive, ready to go from the point you open your application. How often did you experience this? So this is a major challenge that needs to be addressed, as opposed to, say, aviation, where pilots are trained to use technologies. Doctors are trained to help us and cure us and not to use technology. So that's a major challenge.
Thank you very much. Next we have Lesley Jacobs, Professor of Political Science at York University, and he has a short background on protecting privacy rights in the emerging digital economy. I'm going to be using my little 1-minute warning sheet here, because we do want to make sure we end on time and have time for discussion. So, Lesley, please go ahead.
The context for this research project really is, think that this sort of legal and regulatory infrastructure that is crucial to an emerging digital economy in the Canadian context. And as probably most of you realize, there tends to be two strands of this that get a lot of attention. One is on intellectual property developments, and the other one revolves around privacy issues. I'll talk, if I have time at the end, about a third, which really struck me as I project unfolded. What I was trying to do in this project was map out what the existing regulatory system is and its adaptability and its potential for the future. It's actually a part of two related projects that I was carrying on concurrently on privacy rights. One is this project funded by SSHRC, and it was very much done from a regulatory perspective. That's to say, let's try to think from a regulatory point of view what the system is. It's a complex system because in Canada there are overlapping jurisdictions, provincial, federal, but actually from a legal perspective it's much more complex than that, because Canada entered the privacy rights regulation relatively late comparatively, and we had already developed an administrative law system which involves not just the courts but regulatory agencies, legislation, obviously, a wide range of schemes. But I'm also very interested in what I call legal consciousness work. That's to say how ordinary people understand regulatory systems and how that affects rights mobilization. That's to say how people, for example, who think that their privacy rights have been violated, what they think they're going to do with it, and how their understandings of the legal system affects the kind of complaints, avenues, and so on. And concurrent with this project was a project funded by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, focusing on marginal groups and legal consciousness around privacy rights, and focusing in particular on youth between 18 and 24 around social networking, recent immigrants and their experiences with e-finance and international banking, and thirdly, seniors and communication tools in particular, cell phones. Now, the actual mapping exercise is far too complex to get open in a minute or two, and I'm happy to send anybody the report that I wrote. But in effect, I organized it thinking about three kinds of threats. One is what I characterize as new threats to privacy, and that's in effect how digital technology is creating new forms of surveillance and information sharing that's threatening privacy, and how our regulatory system is responding to that. Second is the issue about how new digital technologies are enabling privacy protections. And this actually is something that is a think about it a bit differently, as to say, how can we build in new technologies, privacy protection at the outset? And as Irina neatly pointed out, as a sort of segue into that the cost savings are phenomenal if you can actually have protections built in them from the outset, right? That if you actually have it built in, the savings are immense, both for in terms of public costs in the justice system, but perhaps even more importantly for private firms engaged in the economy, the less kind of response they have to do, the cheaper it is to them. And then the third theme around the global character of the digital economy, trying to think about how is our regulatory system responsive and integrated into a broader global system. So those are sort of the three ways that I thought about the mapping. And the findings broadly is that Canada has actually developed at the federal level relatively strong new regulatory schemes that are trying to respond to the new threats. They're quite uneven at the provincial level. But for example, when it comes to things like banking security, actually, probably some of you, many of you are aware, Canada's actually been extraordinarily successful around that. Things like e-health, there's also been very significant development. Having said that, to go to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, the study there that we've just finished, which is pretty in-depth interview project, shows that the legal consciousness among marginalized groups is just, that's to say that we've actually set up a regulatory system around new threats that has quite good potential. The pickup among marginal groups is really, really depressing. The second is about using digital technology to protect privacy. Canada's, without a doubt, proving itself to be innovative and leading, and there are a lot of the developments significantly have actually come between privacy commissions and largely public enterprises. So things like the smart grid system in Ontario, which is through Ontario Hydro, is a nice illustration of how there's been responses and ongoing dialogue. Very effective, interesting, and lots of leadership on the Canadian part. What it would be very nice to see is much more integration across the country. The third is around the international engagement. Again, Canada's actually been very successful selectively in doing that. Canada playing a major role. And obviously the things like the engagement with social networking organizations, Facebook and so on, and as well for those of you, for example, who've looked at the International Merging of Stock Exchange that's going on, as we consider right now, you're seeing a serious attempt to really address that, and again, community regulatory system showing itself very effective.
Thank you very much. Next we have Cosmin Munteanu. He is a research officer at the National Research Council Institute for Information Technology, same people-centered technology group, and he will talk about beyond the buzzwords of the new digital economy.
Thank you. So I'm a computer science researcher, but have been conducting most of my research in human-computer interaction, which is probably the field that in computer science that is the most multidisciplinary, and by that I don't mean just combining various subdomains of computer science, but actually touching on many other disciplines ranging from psychology to education to linguistics and to social sciences. And today what I would like to do is I would like to challenge researchers in such disciplines to tackle what I think is one of the greatest problems that sit actually very deep in this trend of moving towards a digital economy, and a problem that's not necessarily obvious, but it's quite of a practical nature. And I'd like to start with some very interesting statistics, and the nature of this statistic may not be completely surprising, but I think the actual numbers are. So a few months back, YouTube made public some information about the traffic on their site, and I'm just picking YouTube as a very simple example. So it turns out that nowadays, every minute, there's 35 hours of video uploaded to the site. So every minute, 35 hours. And just to kind of put a little bit of context and help digest these kind of strange numbers, if we take some information from Statistic Canada, an average Canadian watches 20 hours of TV a week. So that means if we need about 10,000 Canadians to switch from watching TV to watching YouTube completely in order to just digest this new content. And that doesn't include everything that's already there. And that doesn't include finding a way for those 10,000 Canadians to share what they've seen and inform all the others. So this is quite of an interesting challenge. So I would say we're sort of in the middle of a gold rush for digital content. And this is facilitated and sometimes encouraged for good reason by various industries, governments, and in general by various aspects of the new information-centric society in which we live. This presents not just opportunities, but also some interesting challenges. So not only this large amount of information that's newly created exists there, but a large amount of it is generated by consumers themselves in various unstructured formats. And typically this includes what I call natural formats, meaning unscripted videos, unedited text, voice tracks, audio tracks. And that creates a little bit of a problem. And this covers everything from not just consumers, but entertainment, news, social media, education, healthcare. These are all part of this phenomenon. So the problem, especially for content generators, is that the amount and nature of all this new information creates this sort of a drowning effect where you want to take your message out and you're just part of those 35 hours that are uploaded every minute. So I think my belief is that we sort of crossed the threshold of having problems for consumers to create content, and now we're facing a different problem, which is finding that content and how we dig for that. And for the past couple of years, I've been witnessing and I've been personally involved in research efforts within various disciplines, mainly in computer science, such as artificial intelligence, natural language processing, computational linguistics, speech recognition, and all these fields are proposing algorithms to improve the search within these information-rich media repositories. And however, I think these efforts need to be better guided and informed, particularly by deep social analysis. And the challenge is finding the right info, and that means relevant, accurate, and trustworthy, particularly in multimedia repository. And this is a topic of research that I strongly believe that only a multidisciplinary approach can really solve. So we need to combine computer science research, engineering research, social sciences, information studies, education, and many others. And first of all, we need to figure out why and how people search for information, how to perform more accurate searches, how to share that information, how to display the search results. And I think this is a problem that will continue to become more acute as time passes by and more content and new media continue to increase. And as a computer science researcher, I find this problem quite fascinating and challenging. And I would like to invite researchers and academics from all fields related to this to contemplate investing some of their times into trying to address what may be one of the big problems with that we face in this new digital economy. Thank you.
Next we have Lyle Wetsch, who is joining us by video conference. He's Associate Professor in the Faculty of Business Administration at Memorial University, and he will be speaking about his SSHRC grant entitled A Knowledge Synthesis on Digital Skills of Educators and Students in Pre-K-12 Education in Canada. Welcome, and go ahead, Lyle. Lyle, can you unmute yourself for us? I think you're muted.
Do you have me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. Good. I think one of the key things that we need to think about is the fact that we're dealing with emerging challenges, and what we've seen is that there's really a lack of understanding with the rapidly emerging digital media that we've got out there, particularly with regards to social media, that's addressing a wide range of components and a wide range of constituents. We need to try to address what we can do, both at the federal level and at the provincial level, to try to address some of these challenges. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think that one of the discussions is that we've got a bit of a new digital divide, which has been apparent in both the some of the Canadian federal reports as well as American federal reports, in that we're dealing with a knowledge divide now rather than a connectivity divide or a connectivity divide with regards to access. We still have some challenges, obviously, as been discussed through other research with regards to communities that do not yet have internet access, but even those that do are facing challenges with regards to knowledge and awareness of social media. One of the ones that was addressed in the reports was the fact that we've got this divide with unemployed Canadians not really having education or understanding of social media channels, and at the same time we've got recruiting practices migrating and moving to social media, and in many cases abandoning their traditional channels of recruitment, leading us to a huge divide that is quite important from an education perspective of human resources. If the unemployed Canadians don't understand how to access social media, but yet that's where all the jobs are being posted, how are we ever going to sort of get these two parties together? And there are programs that are starting to evolve with this, but what we've seen from the research that we did and from sort of the exploration is that more support and more structured programs on the importance of social media, not just in locating jobs, but also in the skills that are required in the workplace. At the second level, we've got gaps that are occurring with the existing employees in the workplace that are still challenging with this emerging channels, but we're seeing at least trends within organizations starting to investigate improving the skills within their workforce. The one that tends to be a bit more ignored for a variety of reasons tends to be looking at those that are not yet in the workforce but sort of moving down that direction. So if we can go to the next slide. And this is where the problem is that we talk about the, those who are digital immigrants versus digital natives, those who have been brought up on digital technology. And I will admit that I do have a bit of a unsort of structured ethnographic study with two 15-year-olds at home. I sort of monitor this evolution on a daily basis as we're going along. And I think one of the problems is the assumption is that because these generations have grown up with digital, that they have a level of competence that is there. And what we've seen in evaluating both workers in the workforce as well as students within institutions is a different perception, and I've sort of characterized this through what I've referred to as an AKI model. It really addresses three different levels, and we could remove the word social media and put digital in there, which would be a little bit more broadly encompassing. But what we've got is we've got 3 levels that are out there. The first level being digital or social media awareness, which is what most parents, most educators, and a lot of individuals in the workforce have. They know social media is there. They may have a Facebook account to be able to monitor what's going on with the grandchildren or relatives who may be away. But that's pretty much the limit of their capabilities. They don't have a full knowledge of the scope of what's there. The second level is where most of the kids that we have growing up today are, and that's the ones that have social media knowledge. They're actively engaged in social and digital media on a daily basis. Just try removing Facebook from my kid's life, and you'll see how important it is. But the problem is that despite the fact that they are digital natives, they've really been self-taught. They've really had no guidance along the way, and all the education that they've got with it is basically hands-on and self-driven. And what this leads to is the fact that we have a significant portion of individuals out there that are engaged in social media who lack the third step, and that's the social media intelligence. They really have not got the part sorted out with regards to ethical evaluations, the realization that, guess what, Google never forgets, and what's there is always there. And this is where the challenge sort of falls, because in the school systems, the teachers are going, well, the kids know more than we do, so they're fine, they need to get on. In the workforce, employers are going, oh, you're under 25, here, you go manage our social media network, you go manage our brand force online. And the assumption that the ability to use technology equates to intelligence is really a big issue. And it's one of the things that was sort of alluded to in some of the other presentations about the fact that we need to start dealing with this education early and often. And we've been investigating and surveying school boards and surveying educators across the country. And what we're finding is that the vast majority, close to 90%, believe that we need to start getting some form of social media or digital curriculum into the program, and in fact 55% believe it needs to start at kindergarten, and if we expand that up to grade 4, we're dealing with almost 80% of the educators that we've surveyed saying this has got to be something that we start sort of around grade 3 or 4, if not early as far as kindergarten. And that's where, if we go to the final slide, what we see here is, we're dealing with some interesting challenges and gaps, and it's not just Canada, because the U.S. is addressing this as well. And that's where it's trying to figure out, well, what are the essential skills for the workplace of today, but not just today, for tomorrow. And this is where we've got to make sure that we focus on the digital aspect, not focus so much on a particular technology, and trying to figure out on how we go about educating the existing workforce that's out there and what role and support federal and provincial governments have to play in that aspect. And this is where we sort of move into the challenge when we look at 3, 4, and 5, and that's the fact that a lot of the discussions is that there needs to be some form of, call it digital citizenship, or some sort of social media literacy curriculum that needs to be incorporated across the board, starting from the K-12 school system and moving into the university education, in much the same way as a number of years ago, certain life skills such as home economics or auto shop were felt to be important and needed to be incorporated into the education. But the challenge comes into when you deal with government jurisdictions and the role that federal and provincial governments have in supporting it. There seems to be sort of almost unanimous acceptance from academic institutions and individuals that are on the ground that we need to go down this direction, but the problem is that they don't have the knowledge, they've never been provided with the training, they don't have the resources or the time to try to incorporate it into their existing structure without some sort of support from the higher levels of government that are on there. And that's one of the things that we need to realize is, yeah, we have digital natives that are starting to move into our workforce, but they've never been given any guidance. We're dealing with a completely self-taught group which is going to create more challenges. And in order to be competitive, we're going to have to try to figure out how to address this. And in an August report from the federal government in the United States, they addressed that social media education and utilization in the pre to K-12 school system was to be one of the #1 priorities for the U.S. education system in order to be globally competitive. And that is sort of reflected in what we're hearing from Canadian educators as well. So that's really the main points that I've got to say, and hopefully we've got time for discussion afterwards because I'm open for any questions or comments.
Thank you. We have our second last speaker, Lorimer, Professor of Communications at Simon Fraser, who will speak about his Knowledge Synthesis Grant on Digital Scholarly Communications.
As you can see from the slide, my title is called to give you a sense of not just what I'm talking about, but what I'm going to say. And it's now new technology, new participants, new policies, scholarly communication, and beyond. We can go to the next slide. In the blink of an eye that closed at the beginning of the 1970s and opened again in the middle of the 1990s, research libraries extended themselves from receivers, organizers, and displayers of goods to digital information service providers. Research libraries have come to see digital technologies as replete with possibilities in information science, possibilities that can parlay them into service providers to scholar authors and the creation of a substantially augmented knowledge communication system. The technology of the middle 1990s also opened the ideas of scholars to the opportunity to create the instantaneous, global, multimedia-based electronic information environment dreamt of by Marshall McLuhan. By the early years of the 21st century, scholars and librarians were making common cause in redesigning the research communication infrastructure by creating robust information flows to the far reaches of academia and into the body politic. Next slide, please. The commercial publishers have been valiantly defending their markets with value-added indexing and other metadata publishing services and global marketing initiatives. The scholarly monograph publishing university presses, who have found themselves in the tenacious embrace of a market model just at the wrong time, have largely been trailing behind this scholar-library partnership development. Marketplace earnings provided insufficient funds for normal business enterprises, the exceptions being Oxford and Cambridge University presses, as well as the university presses of the Ivy League universities in the United States. Next slide. Canadian libraries and scholars have shown notable leadership in contributing to the library scholar digital publishing system. But rather than Canada conferring recognition based on that leadership in digital scholarly publishing, there exists a policy and program vacuum. Canada lacks the policies and hence the building infrastructures to benefit from continuing development and derivative knowledge-based industry. Canada has funded one 4-year, $12 million project that steered funds to Open Journal Systems and RUD. That project is Synergies. And there is no obvious path for continuing funding because no Canadian policy exists to stimulate knowledge communication, research, and development. Next slide. In contrast, Britain has the Wellcome Trust and JISC, the Joint Information Services Committee, a continuing initiative that spends £50 million annually supporting digital technology in the higher education sector. The US has SPARC, the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition that seeks to facilitate open access scholarly publishing. It also has the supportive activities of the Mellon Foundation, which funded JSTOR. The U.S., this is going on to another example, the U.S. Office of Science and Technology Scholarly Publishing Roundtable, PubMed Central with its international branches, the Public Library of Science, and Paul Ginsberg's archive.org, to name just a few initiatives. The EU has funded OAPEN, the Open Access Publishing for European Networks, which focuses on publishing open access scholarly monographs in the social sciences and humanities, backed up by policies that require work to be funded by the European Research Council to be publicly accessible within 12 months. Last slide. How should this policy vacuum in Canada be addressed? Canada needs a program of funding to explicitly address inventive social science and humanities research projects and sustaining infrastructure for scholarly communication and beyond. Such an approach to understanding might equally be termed constructivist social science and humanities inquiry, or perhaps even more simply, social science and humanities research and development. What is most important? The creation of nothing less than a funding agency, or at the very least, a funding program for social science and humanities R&D. This would provide the backbone for the development and ongoing sustenance of a creative digital knowledge economy. I have already figured out a nickname. It would be called the Mother of Inventions.
We have one more speaker, and we are close to being out of time, so I'm hoping people can stay for a few minutes past 11:30 so that we at least have time for one question or comment. So I'd like to invite Susan Brown, who's Associate Professor at Guelph in the Department of English, to speak about her SSHRC grant on sustaining digital scholarship for sustainable culture. Thanks.
I'm timing myself. Lasting Change is the title of the report of our inquiry into knowledge and knowledge regarding the sustainability of scholarly activity and associated cultural activities in Canada in the wake of the digital turn. Our research group ranged from academics and librarians to writers and publishers, and includes Ray Siemens, who is at the back of the room here. Our title conveys the fact that change has become an ongoing state as a result of digital tools and methods, and has changed the modes of scholarship and cultural production in key ways, many of which we've heard about here today. The symbiotic relationship between scholarship and culture in the production of non-traditional forms of knowledge and cultural production were our focus. Although static print-oriented publications, whether in print or online, continue to be highly regarded forms of academic research output and cultural production, an increasing amount of such activity is being produced in other forms, more flexible, updatable, dynamic, malleable, reusable forms that make them both very important records of the present and the foundation for future knowledge, creativity, and innovation in the future. But only if we can sustain them, only if we can make them last. We found evidence of the contribution of both digital scholarship and culture as significant and linked drivers of the economy and innovation, though ones that are insufficiently understood. The trackable impacts, which do vary according to how they're being tracked, amount to more than 7% of the GDP, $85 billion, and more than 1 million jobs. That's counting spin-offs as well as direct employment. We also found evidence of the limited value of purely economic analysis, both because of impacts of scholarly and cultural activity being very hard to measure, although undeniable, and because of factors that don't lend themselves to measurements such as quality of life or citizen engagement. The impacts of scholarship and culture need also to be understood in relation to notions of the public good. We are punching under our weight digitally, being one of the most wired countries in the world, but garnering as little as 16% or less of our own web traffic. Canadian web content generation is key to a successful digital economy. Part of that content needs to be generated through a massive national digitization initiative. Our recent affirmation of the rights of Aboriginal peoples actually mandates particular attention to sustaining that heritage. A national multi-sector digitization initiative would spur the economy in the short term and provide the foundation for increased knowledge and cultural production in the long run. Part of it needs to be preservation of existing digital materials. This is where obsolescence comes in a big way. And part of it needs to be produced by our knowledge and cultural creators. Like many of the other synthesis grants, we found significant national policy gaps. And here I would point to an intellectual property regime that ensures sufficient circulation to enable knowledge mobilization and cultural creativity while respecting creator rights, research funding structures to support non-traditional digital dissemination, national standards for digital preservation and sustainability to advance the collaborative digital initiatives already underway, and support for a national digital tools repository. I like the idea of an iTunes type store that fosters digital creation and sustainability. And last of all, policies to foster new forms of scholarship, collaboration, and partnership in cross-sector initiatives, knowledge mobilization, and the training of highly versatile, technically trained personnel. Our most significant finding, perhaps, is the inability to extract economic from other considerations in considering the sustainability of scholarship in the arts and the digital media environment. As Canada pursues development of its digital economy, we will lose if we don't pursue economic questions in dialogue with an understanding of the importance of non-economic factors. Each time there's been a major development in communications in Canada, there has been a major parliamentary commission to consider the implications of the shift, very broadly, and not just economically. The digital turn is arguably greater than any other development in communications media since the development of the codex of print, and yet we have had no royal commission. National culture, national identity, national sovereignty, and the public good need to be placed in dialogue with economic goods through broad public consultation and debate. Despite significant gaps in our knowledge, our findings make clear that the lack of a national strategy for both the digitization of our existing cultural archives and the preservation of foreign digital artifacts is a huge problem. Canada, as we just heard, seriously lags behind many industrialized nations in this regard. Sustainability has substantial costs, but it also brings genuine economic and other benefits, whereas the loss of the records of Canada's knowledge base and cultural creations could only be a loss to us all. If we as a digital society understand knowledge as a public good, Canada will invest in sustaining digital scholarship and the digital arts, ensuring access to the results of publicly funded research and the record of our past and present creativity.